Guys, it's John, and I wanted to go into our weekly plays. Obviously, we started off a little rusty. I had the Ravens winning, and the Packers kept it close, but had them winning as well. So 0-2 so far to start the year, but obviously a lot of games to be played. So I did look at week 2 because I think it gives us a little bit of information as far as just kind of what makes sense in my opinion. Certain teams that would make more sense to win for their week 2 matchups and vice versa. So the first one that I have here, obviously, Cardinals, Bills. And for this one, I do think that the Bills might drop off this year. And I thought about the upset, but week 2 is actually Bills, Dolphins. It makes more sense to me that they both probably have a win, or especially of the two teams, the Bills, just because I think most people are expecting them to really fall off. So I think they're gonna open up the season a little stronger than people think. I don't think they're going to have a lock on the division like they have been, but I do think that they'll do all right. Anyway, do they cover 6.5? I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm gonna say yeah, they do cover. A touchdown again. It's not like it's the Bills from last year. If that was the case, then 6.5 makes sense. But you lose Diggs, and I feel like it should be closer to like 4.5 to 5 points. And even though it's only like a couple points, it does make a difference. When like Vegas has a certain line, I just feel like sometimes they're just a little bit high and a little bit low. So I think again they definitely win, and I do like the cover. For Patriots Bengals, this one again is another one where I looked at and thought maybe an upset, but over a touchdown. Bengals at home. It's not like they had a great year last year, and I do think they want to reestablish the Bengals. I'm sure they play the Chiefs this year, even if they don't though. With Burrow and Chase and just the guys they have in general, I feel like they're gonna want to establish them. I also think there's a couple teams from the AFC, like I said, like the Bills and some other teams that aren't going to do as good as they did last year. So it would make sense. A team like the Bengals has a strong year. So I like them. And again, do they cover? I'm gonna say yes. I think they'll cover. I think 7.5 is just a little bit heavy. Vikings Giants. I like the Giants to win outright. I just think it's the 100th year for them. So it's the 100th year. It was a 1 point line. It's at 1 o'clock, 100, right? And just besides all that, I think they're going to win because no Barkley. Again, the Vikings are not a trash team like the Giants have been. So I find it odd that, even with Cousins leaving, it's not like he was a superstar. I mean, some people would say so, but I don't think so. I think they're going to just have the Vikings continue to do poorly, especially because I think Bears and some of the other teams in the division, basically all the other teams, Bears, Packers, and Lions, are going to do well. So I think the Vikings are going to be basement dwellers this year. So I also think more people will be on the Vikings. So I like the Giants straight up. Here I like the Bears. I like the cover. And I was wondering if I thought they were going to have Caleb start off slow or just come out looking like a rocket. And I'm still not sure. But I do think just opening week, you're at home. You put all this investment into Caleb. I think it makes sense to just get them off to a 1-0 start. They finished last year with a pretty good record. Not record overall, but like their last several, I think they were like last 8 weeks or something. They were like the best team in football or something like that. They were like 5-3, 6-2. They had a pretty good record to finish the year, so I think they pick it up. They continue the Caleb narrative. They're going to push this guy to the moon. So yeah, I really like the Bears here. Panthers Saints. I like the Panthers to cover. I'm not gonna. Oh yeah, and I like the Bears to cover, by the way. So yeah, I like them to cover. Panthers Saints. I like the Panthers just to win, but I'm taking the 4 points. Unlike some of the others, which I'll get into, I do like the spread here. You could play the win too, sure, but I just think the Panthers are gonna win. I think nobody's gonna be on them. They were terrible last year. Saints at home, so the line. Maybe about right because the Saints aren't a great team, but I think they're a lot better than the Panthers. So I think people are going to be all over. This is a game that I like to call a parlay killer. A lot of people will do parlays and they'll throw one like this in there, right? They'll just throw the Saints to win, not for the cover, because it's like an easy one, right? Like they should definitely win at home against the Panthers. And very often these type of 3-4 point games where people want to they throw them in a parlay, they wind up killing the parlay. So I like the Panthers. You could take the win, you could take the cover. I like both, obviously. Obviously, if I like the win, then I think they'll cover. But the +4 is probably going to be a little bit safer. Steelers, Falcons. I actually do like the Falcons for a couple reasons. One of those reasons being, I think the narrative between Fields and Russell will be interesting. So if the Steelers win, then there maybe not much of an argument. But if they start losing, start off 0-1, 0-2, then all of a sudden we might start seeing them talk about if Fields is going to start or, what they're going to do with Russ. So I think that makes just more sense for the narrative. I think Bijan Robinson's going to completely break out this year. And I also think, and they got Cousins, so they probably want to make them look at least halfway competent. And again, I just feel like both of these teams were, I'd say, really close to even last year. So the fact that they're at home, I guess, would make sense for the 3.5 as far as the Falcons. The Steelers are probably, to be honest, better than the Falcons last year, I would say, just because of the way the defense looked. So Falcons -3.5. I think more people will be on the Steelers. This one's a tough one to call for the cover because both of these teams always have 3-point games. They're just notorious for it. But I'll say the Falcons win, and I'll say the Falcons also do cover. Jags, Dolphins. I like the Jags cover. This one's really a 50-50 game in my opinion. It just depends on how much they believe in Tua. But I do like the cover because, again, I think they'll keep this game pretty close. So the fact that I think they're going to keep it close, obviously I like the 3.5. I also don't think people think too much of the Jags. So it also makes sense to me that it's not like it's a big spread, 3.5. It's another one where I could see people just throwing the Dolphins in here, to boost their parlay. So I think the Jags definitely get the cover here. The win, again, I would lean Jags, but I like the cover, that +3.5. Texans, Colts, I like the Colts. I like them straight up, and I like them because we got Richardson back. And Richardson obviously barely played last year. I don't even think they had a matchup with him and CJ. I could be wrong. But even if they did, I mean, not many people remembered it. And this would be a good time to start up that feud, that rivalry. And CJ also praised Jesus. And you know how the NFL, ESPN, Disney feels about athletes being religious. Just look at Derek Carr. If you look at Tim Tebow, there's a lot of religious players who don't get treated too well. So they even cut it out of the I think it was MSN. It wasn't the NFL, but it was like MSN, one of them, cut out his quote where he praised Jesus. So I think the Colts are going to win for a few reasons. Maybe CJ gets a little bit of a penance and, doesn't have quite the year he had last year. You need Richardson to look good. And Houston added a lot of weapons, or a couple major weapons, and to only be 3-point favorites just doesn't make too much sense to me. They're talking about Stroud possibly winning MVP. So, again, everybody should be all over the Texans, I feel like, so I like the Colts here to win. Same with the Raiders. The Chargers reinvigorated. They add Harbaugh. Raiders, again, they kind of remind me of just Broncos, who we're going to go into next. Just another, below average team. Hasn't really shown too much, in my opinion, to make me think that anybody should be on them. Whereas the Chargers are going to have a lot of hype, I feel like. There's going to be a lot of hype on the Chargers. So for this one, I like the Raiders. I like the win. You can take the cover too, of course. But I think they'll just win. And also Pierce, obviously Harbaugh, people aren't going to turn on him after 1 week. Pierce got the contract because they did the way they finished last year, had a really good finish to the year. Fans love him. So I think it makes sense that you start him off with a win. Continue at least the narrative that the Raiders could be competitive. So I like the Raiders here. Broncos, Seahawks here. It's kind of normally I'd call it like a 50-50, but I think 6 is a little heavy. But at the same time, I think the Broncos might have the worst record in all of football this year. I just have a feeling. It just seems like they're getting absolutely no talk, and the teams they don't talk about at all are the ones who obviously wind up having like the worst record in football, or at least one of the worst records. And the Broncos just not getting talked about. The Russ experiment didn't work out, obviously. Whatever. Again, I think they just probably brought him in for ratings or whatever the reason was. But there's just nothing to make me think that the Broncos are going to be competitive. And the Seahawks, 6 points, I feel like a little heavy. It's not like the Seahawks are a great team. So I think people will like do more teasers with the Broncos getting 13 or even taking the 6, maybe buy the point, get the 7. And I think more people will be on the Broncos. So I like the Seahawks here for the cover. And I think they kind of look a little better than they did last year, the Seahawks. They have a couple young guys. They got K9. Some guys that I think they're going to want to push. Cowboys Browns. This one's probably going to be a very entertaining one, and I think the Cowboys will win. I do. It's kind of trappish, but not really. Like both teams did make the playoffs. Both teams didn't go that far in the playoffs, so it's not like one team's that much better than the other. I will concede more of the public might take the Cowboys over the Browns, but again, you got the Browns at home, so it could really even out. But I just think they're going to make the division look strong, and kind of as long as Jerry Jones is alive, I feel like they're going to compete. And opening game, I'll take the Cowboys here to win straight up. Commanders Bucs. Not really sure what they're going to do with either of these teams, if I'm being honest. But I do like the Commanders. I like the Commanders with the points. Again, this one is another one to me that screams a possible 3-point game. So I think the smart play is definitely Commanders plus 3.5. Bucs, I don't think they're going to do anything special with them. I mean, it's a terrible division. They certainly could win. I'm not saying they can't. That's why I'm taking the Commanders with the 3.5. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Bucs won. But I just don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game. So that's another thing that kind of goes in line with a closer score. So yeah, I like the Commanders plus 3.5 here. Rams Lions. Isn't this a playoff rematch? I think the Rams, again, it seemed like they just gave a lot of guys their flowers, like Aaron Donald, and when they won that Super Bowl, I mean. And just a bunch of guys that Stafford, who left the Lions and went to the Rams, which is interesting because I went into this last year in the playoffs. We had Goff versus Stafford, and the reason we predicted that as the matchup before it happened was because we had a guy that left the Lions, went to the Rams, and playing his old team, and then the Rams obviously had Goff go to the Lions playing his old team. So it's pretty interesting dynamic. But as far as this game, like it's I think the Rams kind of just got that one off, and I don't think they're really going to be very competitive again. They do like Pico, I think his name's, or Puka, whatever his name. I think it's Puka. They do like him. So I think I'm mixing up the Texans receiver and the Rams receiver because they both came out last year and had like crazy years. But either way, I just don't think the Rams are going to do anything crazy. I think they want to continue the narrative of the Lions being a good team. So I'll take the Lions to win, and I'll take them to cover. And Monday, gosh, this one's actually, it's probably why they made it for Monday. I'm not even sure if I should just wait and go into this one on its own. I probably will, be honest, just because I really want to look into what they're going to do with the Jets. If I think they're going to push Rodgers. Again, I said this in I think it was my last video. I do think that they're going to push the Jets pretty hard this year. Whatever they had planned last year that for whatever reason they aborted, I think they're going to have their defense look just as good as the Niners' defense looked last year. That's kind of what I thought they were going to do with the Jets last year. I think they're going to do that this year. And just a couple of the pieces that they've added, a couple of the changes they've made, it just makes me think that they're going to have the Jets look a lot better and definitely make the playoffs. So I most likely will be taking them to win. Like if I had to pick right now, I would take the Jets. I think again also the Niners they just went to the Super Bowl. They ran through most of the teams they played last year. And I think, the jury's still out on the Jets. So I think way more people will be on the Niners. So I think I like the Jets to straight up win. But I can go more into that one in a video tomorrow. Again, just because I really want to look into what the narratives are with Rodgers. I might watch a Pat McAfee podcast, not the whole thing. That would be too excruciating. But just a few minutes, or clips where he's got Rodgers on, just to see what they're talking about, because that would be pretty interesting. So yeah, that's what I think is going to win/cover. And what I'll say is, because again, if you're tailing my exact picks, I had a unit on the Ravens that didn't come through. Then I put 2 units on the Packers, and obviously that didn't come through. So for my 4-unit play of all of these, my favorite play is it's the Colts. It is. I don't see this any justification for this 3-point spread. I think it should be like 5.5, even with the Colts at home. The Texans just and the Colts get a little bit of revenge because the Texans beat them in the last game of the year last year to get in the playoffs. But between Richardson, the fact that the line doesn't make sense to me, the Texans have an odds-on favor for MVP, and Richardson theoretically should be pretty rusty. Didn't play much last year, coming off a big injury. I just don't see why anybody would be taking the Colts in this matchup. So this would be my leg 3 for 4 units. That's what I'm doing personally. The rest are going to be leg 1s because that's how the system works. You just 1 unit, 2 unit, 4 unit. But I think this one. So actually we'll be getting plus odds as well. We're getting plus 135. So for 4 units, I am going to be playing the Colts to win. And that'll, assuming we win, which I think we will, easily mitigate the Chiefs' loss and the Eagles' loss. So, of all the games, that's my absolute favorite for a leg 3. There's a couple other ones that I think are, I wouldn't say locks, but like the Raiders, I like that one a good bit. And I like the Falcons a good bit. So, there's a few that I like, more than others, of course. But as far as for the leg 3, that's going to be on the Colts. So that's basically it. As the season goes on, I'll have more, obviously, as far as narratives and stuff. We'll be able to see what they're actually doing. We really don't know right now. We just have an idea. But as far as the lines and the narratives that we know so far, these are all the teams that I do like. So take care and happy earnings.